Viralitari and Pesticides Report.
In 1994, a group of Mexicans concerned with cultures and ecology presented the documentary film Huicholes and Pesticides. Since then, neoliberal policies defined by the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, have contributed to the loss of our food security, the indiscriminate use of pesticides, the massive exodus of farmers, and environmental disaster. Beginning in 1994, we have broadcast our documentary throughout the tobacco-producing regions of Nayarit, in the Huichol Sierras, among farm worker organizations, in colleges and universities, and through other media outlets.
Since then, we've joined efforts with individuals and organizations in Mexico and abroad who fight for the recognition and enforcement of farm workers and their families' rights.
En una ventanilla estaba su carita bañada por el llanto. Camión de pasajeros porque...
To inform indigenous peasants and day laborers who work by the millions in the agro-industry, and to make the right to information a reality in their own languages, we translated Huicholes and Pesticides into 12 indigenous Mexican languages.
Plaguicida carucheche canistale de neruti caniginti.
Milojival joyagual chamel chapajem yon yashmilawan.
Because pesticides are chemical substances designed to kill.
This video has also been translated into English, French, and German.
Das Volk der Huichol glaubt,
Believe that they're responsible for keeping the flames of life burning.
Et de préserver l'équilibre des forces de la nature.
Huicholes and Pesticides has been broadcast over 30 countries in the Americas and Europe. This has been a valuable way to make the civil societies of these countries, which produce pesticides, often banned within their own borders, aware of the damage these toxic chemicals leave in their wake.
But these chemicals are allowed to be exported. To further inform the workers of their rights and the damaging effects of pesticides and basic precautionary measures to minimize the risks of exposure, we took on the task of producing and broadcasting radio spots containing the pertinent information in Spanish and 12 indigenous languages.
Bertha, don't let the kids sleep there.
Why, Micaela?
I learned it's very dangerous to sleep in the same place where pesticides are being stored.
Part of the Amuzgo people, we are broadcasting from Radio Ñomda, the voice of water.
We've proved that in Mexico it remains difficult to broadcast messages in indigenous languages.
Suddenly, I received a call from a commercial radio station saying, "We can't play the radio spots because they're spoken in indigenous languages." What do you mean you can't play them? They told me, "We run the risk of losing our license because they're not in Spanish."
The radio is a fast way to spread ideas.
In order to prove what was stated in the documentary regarding the damages people suffer after being exposed to pesticides, our NGO, the Huichol and Pesticide Project, conducted an epidemiological study comparing exposed people with a control group who had not been exposed to pesticides.
This study was not only the first of its kind in Mexico, but one of the most extensive studies made in Latin America in a specific agricultural zone.
Of the 448 people who participated in the study, 161 were Huichol day laborers.
The health study consisted of measuring the concentration of the enzyme acetylcholinesterase in the blood.
In healthy individuals, the neurotransmitter acetylcholine facilitates the transmission of nerve impulses sent by the brain to the muscles. The body also produces an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase to block the impulses. Pesticides interfere with that blocking enzyme so that impulses continue without interruption, causing the seizures seen in this film. The nerve signal repeats itself endlessly, out of control.
Yes, the vast majority of cases of intoxication we treat are acute. Why? Because acute cases worsen rapidly. They are dramatic. The symptoms are clearly visible and call for urgent attention.
The results of the epidemiological study showed that the group of people sampled was contaminated with neurotoxic insecticides. Women and children are those most affected, since they present the lowest levels of the blocking enzyme. Young girls are especially vulnerable to neurotoxic pesticides, since they suffer from the highest levels of malnutrition. The health study demonstrated that low levels of acetylcholinesterase were found not only in those who are directly exposed to organophosphate and carbamate pesticides, but also among the general population of the entire area where pesticides are used, an area where cases of chronic illnesses have been steadily on the rise.
Chronic illnesses caused by pesticides do not manifest themselves immediately. Even those pesticides labeled as moderate or slightly toxic may cause health problems long after prolonged exposure and not be identified as the causal agent.
In cases of chronic intoxication, the patient feels ill and has no clue to the nature or origin of the illness. They visit doctors who also find it difficult to recognize the cause for the illness. Chronic effects result from the buildup of toxins after constant exposure to pesticides at low-level doses.
Chronic intoxication is a slow, gradual, cumulative buildup of toxins in the body. No one is tracking this kind of intoxication. There is no registry. We don't even have sufficient staff to keep track of this information.
I never thought I'd get sick. But over the time, I began to suffer the consequences and symptoms. At that point, the illness became severe. I used 4 types of herbicides: esterone, gramoxone, tresquate.
Chronic exposure can lead to dermatitis, asthma, depression of the immune system, congenital birth defects, varying types of cancer, learning disabilities, and infertility. Since 1995, we have been organizing training workshops on how to deal with the inherent risks of working with pesticides.
We spread the word about the workers' right to information and their right to proper code enforcements, such as establishing and respecting re-entry times to pesticide-treated fields. One of the accomplishments of this workshop was that some communities ended up declaring themselves as pesticide-free territories. With experience gained through the workshops, along with the collaboration of affected workers and other organizations, we began to search for local solutions to global problems.
They don't explain nothing. We don't have a clue. There are workers from all over who don't know nothing about it and really don't give a damn. Some cover their faces with a bandana, but most don't use no protection.
When they were intoxicated in Juan José Rios, 47 workers became intoxicated with furidine as airplanes dusted the crops. 2 of those 47 workers died.
Although aerial dusting has been banned from pesticide application, we still find it being used. Those who absolutely decide are the investors. It is a hidden agenda to carry out genocide. Let them all die. All of us indigenous people. In our case.
The health study results confirmed that children, especially girls, are those most at risk from exposure to pesticides.
Shockingly, our fields are filled with child workers.
We must admit it, this is a problem. Not only in tobacco fields, it's happening with all the crops grown in our state.
No. These are children that accompany their parents. They don't work on the fields. They're there for company.
There is child labor, but our industry is committed to eradicating these practices, at least in tobacco, through a number of socially responsible programs.
We sounded the alarm and joined in with other organizations that defend children's rights.
Though forbidden by law, in Mexican fields it's commonplace, even normal, to see minors working. They work full-time shifts, just like adults, but earn less when they do get paid. If they're indigenous children, they earn even less.
Since 2001, the tobacco industry has opened centers called Flourish, to provide shelter to some children of Tobacco Day workers during the day.
For this, the tobacco industry received a prize for their philanthropy, which stands in stark contrast to their lack of compliance with national and international worker safety regulations.
However, preventing child labor and the resulting poisoning with pesticides is not a philanthropic affair. It is a matter of justice. While they received the award, we presented the tobacco companies with a labor code of conduct, a code which they completely ignored. In 2003, we had the opportunity to participate in the project Stolen Childhoods, a documentary film addressing child labor around the world.
Ukifuna mikono ya mtu anasikia uchungu mikono kama ile dawa.
We share the concerns of recently deceased activist and Nobel Award winner Wangari Maathai.
Misusing children as workers is a form of murder. It's a slow death that you are giving, a sentence of death that you're giving to the child.
In the 50s, we were warned about the dangers of pesticides. In the controversial and censored documentary Poisons, Pests, and People, the risks and damages caused by these chemicals were exposed.
In a remote river, flowing through the heart of a great forest, this salmon was on her way upstream to spawning grounds. She will never reach her destination. She is dying.
After World War II, these toxic substances were converted from chemical weapons into insecticides intended for prolonged everyday use.
Rachel Carson, author of the landmark book Silent Spring, started a revolution. Carson warned of the dangers of chemical pesticides. She warned of science's power to alter nature and called for government action to protect its citizens.
That of the right of the citizen to be secure in his own home against the intrusion of poisons applied by other persons. I strongly feel that this is or should be one of the basic human rights.
And with Carson's words and spirit, the modern environmental movement was born.
Unless we do bring these chemicals under better control, we are certainly headed for disaster.
The disaster predicted since the 50s is now at our doorstep. Over 60 years ago, the Green Revolution promised to end world hunger using hybrid seeds and pesticides. Despite this promise, today, with the 21st century in full swing, 1 out of every 7 people on the planet suffers from hunger. The North American Free Trade Agreement allows the tax-free purchase and import of pesticides and crop-dusting aircraft acquired without paying the value-added tax. Since the establishment of NAFTA, the use of pesticides in Mexico has continuously increased.
More than 4 billion tons of active pesticides ingredients have been applied worldwide, with a very negative historical impact.
They have polluted the soil, the air, and the water, persisting there for many years to come. They destroy our biodiversity by killing off birds, fish, and all kinds of beneficial insects, such as bees.
Insects, plants, and microorganisms exposed to pesticides develop resistance. This leads to the indiscriminate and unregulated use of pesticides.
The Mexican Department of Health has registered more than 75,000 people who have suffered from pesticide poisoning over these years. However, the official numbers are significantly lower than the reality, since most cases never get reported. The Department of Health newsletter does not report how many poisoned individuals have died or how many suffered chronic diseases.
Today we are treating diseases provoked by toxins released into the environment more than 15 years ago. In 2007, several pesticides such as heptachlor were persistently detected in the breast milk of women in Guadalajara.
In the state of Nayarit, 279 rural women who had been exposed to pesticides participated in a study. 93 had babies born with congenital deformations. In Sonora, we have seen an array of neurological disorders in children exposed to pesticides.
The agricultural sector is where the largest quantities of pesticides are used, with no enforcement of worker health and safety codes.
Approximately 215 million children are part of the global workforce. 115 million of them work in hazardous conditions.
We know that there are many children working in areas such as crop agriculture. In particular, we make a specific call for all countries to adopt hazardous work lists, and substances are listed.
We have learned that pesticides are all around us. They are in the fields and in the city, in the countryside and in the street, in our fumigated daycare centers, in our homes,
along the roads by which they're transported, and in the waste that has no identified sites for containment or treatment.
In the store and supermarket, in the store and supermarket, in the store and supermarket.
In the milk, in the water, in the air, in our bodies, in those flowers.
The pesticide market is controlled by only 6 transnational corporations, which control 70% of the world market, making them a true cartel.
Big corporations always find ways to increase their already enormous profits. Good example is the growing industry of genetically modified organisms, which agribusiness argues is required for global food security.
We do not have to accept and use technology that is unsustainable and deficient for Mexico, and also implies health risks. Europe has conducted research which implies that the ingestion of transgenic foods over the medium and long term can have adverse effects on the health of the consumers and also on the environment, as these toxins accumulate in the soil and groundwater, as is already happening in the United States.
Authorities continue to allow the import of extremely and highly toxic substances without the fulfillment of the Rotterdam Convention. When multinational corporations are no longer allowed to produce toxic substances in their home country, they transfer the production to countries with fewer restrictions, with more relaxed regulations, cheap labor, and rampant corruption. The Interdepartmental Commission is in charge of controlling the production, transportation, storage, and use of pesticides, but it does not monitor the compliance with laws, nor does it have enough facilities to discard used contaminated pesticide containers. The high number of poisoned people and the numerous accidents are evidence of the prevailing disaster.
In the year 2000, the pesticide manufacturer Tech Chem exploded in Salamanca, Guanajuato. The final tally of the damages is unknown, and victims are still fighting for justice. Anaversa, a large national agrochemical production facility located in downtown Córdoba, Veracruz, exploded in 1991, affecting upwards of 300,000 people.
This factory, called the Dragon, exploded on March 23rd. This factory presents serious dangers. It's a ticking time bomb in our region.
Huichols and Pesticides also has learned and would like to share our conclusion, that it is us, all of us, who must change this situation.
We will do it. The person who requires explanations for the spraying of public spaces, because they have the right to know and to be informed.
We, the neighbor who demand the relocation of pesticide outlets.
We, who refuse to fall for misleading publicity.
We who try to avoid eating food grown with pesticides.
If we could observe a glance at our fields, we would observe an age-old culture that resists, that races against everything and everyone. There are people, communities, entire regions, and entire rural families who continue to fight to offer future generations of farmers a livable and desirable alternative. People who stubbornly continue to work the land and farm well, and also farm in innovative ways. These are people who believe it's important to keep their traditions and customs. Farmers who are open and pleased to learn new ways and tools, as long as these changes don't destroy their culture or paradigm, or wipe out methods that have been proven over centuries. This is done by means of a well-organized project, a productivity project, an economic project, a cultural project, a political project, I would say. This is perfectly viable in other places, that is to say, what they are making is milpa. Collectively, they're addressing various needs that people have, and therefore, there are diversified organizations. I believe this is the model for families, the model for communities, the model for rural organizations, and it ought to be the national model.
It is said that eating is a political statement and an environmental act. Because I choose with my pocketbook to support McDonald's, I am actively supporting industrial agriculture. However, if I choose to go to a farmer's market, to a farmer's fair, then I am supporting small farmers.
It is urgent to take drastic measures to reverse the disaster we have found ourselves in. It is urgent to change agricultural policies that favor industrial production that are not sustainable in the long term. It is urgent to make fundamental changes in patterns of production, purchase, and consumption. It is urgent to make profound changes in society and in politics in order to ensure our right to a healthy life. The challenge is to live pesticide-free.